Welcome to This Week in Virginia, and it's a delight to have Joe Damico, the Director of the Department of General Services, on This Week in Virginia for the first time. This week in Richmond, you were on, but it's been a little bit over a year ago since we've had a conversation such as this. Mr. Damico served as Deputy Director since 2002 up until the time of his appointment in 2018 to be the Director. I was checking, and along the way, you were able to spend time in the military, and have had a combined about 15 years of service, and I believe I could refer to you as Captain Damico, as well as Director. You know, Joe, the last time we talked, in addition to your two master's degrees in VCU, you're undergraduate in Longwood, and it was really nice. About the time we had the show, the magazine at Longwood, the alumni magazine, had a great story about you, about Not Your Average Joe. Well, I was delighted to find before we had this conversation that the National Association of State Chief Administrators had even upped the award beyond what your own college did, and you were the winner of the prestigious National Ray Walton Award, which they honored you for your passion, your outstanding service, your leadership, and your commitment to state government. So we here in the Commonwealth of Virginia are really glad that nationally people recognized what we have seen here in your work in state government, and especially your work in general services. Well, I could spend more time with your introduction, but let's jump right into it. When we talked a little over a year ago, we were talking about the construction projects around Capitol Square, construction and renovation projects. So why don't you jump in right there and give us some update for October of 2021.
Sure, David, and thank you very much for having me today. And just a quick comment in the recognition. Of course, Longwood did a wonderful job, a wonderful write-up, and a wonderful recognition of me as a graduate. And the National Leadership Award really is a reflection on the entire DGS team. And so I do thank you, though, for bringing those up before we start our update. So with that, update on Capitol Square, right? So we still have a number of moving parts, some of which are much further along than we last talked. We've actually got one that's been completed and a few that'll be completed here in the coming months. And I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of bring us from east to west, the projects that we are working on in Capitol Square. As to start to give some type of direction for our presentation. So to begin with, Ferguson Building. Ferguson Building is a building that kind of sits between the Madison Building and Monroe Building. And if you weren't looking for it, probably really wouldn't notice it. It's a building that has been used by the DGS maintenance an operation team for many years. We found that we no longer needed it for the purposes that DGS was using it for, and we were looking for a way to repurpose that building. In talking with the Capitol Police had a need for a canine training facility, and so in working with them in our design team, we have designed a facility that will be a indoor training facility for canines, not only for Capitol Police, but it would be available for our other law enforcement partners in the region. It also will house Capitol Police offices. Going a little northeast from that site is the Morrison Row renovation. Morrison Row, a facility that was built in the 1860s. It's the last example of row homes on Governor Street. The facility is being renovated to accommodate about 21,000 square feet of office space. The plan is to put state agencies into that space. And we hope to have that completed the first quarter of 2022. Moving further west would be Old City Hall, a National Historic Landmark, a building that was built over the time of the late 1880s to 1890s. The Commonwealth took possession of that building in the 1980s and used it for state office space, as well as there were some consultants that leased that space from DGS. We undertook a renovation of that National Historic Landmark, and we are driving that facility to an end. I think you will see on the exterior, particularly the east, south, and west facades have been repointed, have been cleaned. You'll see new copper on the exterior. It's really a building that really draws your attention from the exterior, as well as it will on the interior. That building is scheduled to be completed the second quarter of 2022.
Hey, Joe, before you leave Old City Hall, people who have been around Capitol Square a long time, and even longer than I have, may remember that movies, different scenes of movies, have been shot inside that building. There was a trial, I think, in one movie a long time ago. I don't know the name of it. But then there were other movies that were shot where people would be looking down on the street below that would have sod or have sawdust on it to make it look like it was Civil War time. So there's a lot of history inside that building if it could only talk.
No doubt about it, David. And not only Old City Hall, but a number of our facilities, as well as the Capitol grounds, have been used for movies, TV shows. It's just the beauty and the diverseness of what we have here at Capitol Square.
All right, I interrupted you as you were moving on west.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about the new General Assembly building, a building that's going to rise, or has risen up to 14 stories above ground. We have one level below grade. The facility is going to be about 420,000 plus gross square feet. On the first floor, we will have food service. The building will house the General Assembly members, the staff that support the General Assembly, as well as the Division of Legislative Services. As you can see on the exterior of that building, we've completed, for the most part, the precast panels that comprise the exterior. We are inside the building today, putting up drywall. We've started painting, and we are moving into the finishes phase of the new GAB. That phase will take us to the fourth quarter of 2022. We do expect that we will start moving furniture into that building probably late summer of next year, and working very closely with the clerks, not only from the very beginning, of course, in the design, the construction, but also now in the coordination to bring this building online for them for their 2023 session. We're on target for that. We're excited for it. Less than a year from now, there's going to be a lot of activity in that building, getting it ready for a 2023 session.
Well, that's really a project that's taken several years, and it's been moving along. And am I right, Joe, in thinking that it's a little not quite as tall as some of the old building, but and maybe not as many square feet, but just it's designed to be more usable rather than those buildings that were I guess you would say, I could say, cobbled together at one time.
Yes, David. With regard to the square footage of the building, we are slightly larger than the previous facility that the General Assembly had used. Height-wise, maybe about the same height. I don't know that it's any taller or any shorter, but it's probably about the same size. But is slightly larger from a square footage footprint. Next to the GAB, across the street at 9th Street, we have a new parking deck going up. We poured the first level slab last week, and we are framing the slabs as we go up in that facility as we speak. It's going to be 7 stories tall. The facility will house 500 parking spaces that will be used by state employees that work in Capitol Square. Both legislative, executive branch employees will have use of that parking deck. We talked last time that there is a tunnel connection between the new General Assembly building and the parking deck under 9th Street. That connection has been made to the new parking deck, and we will be moving into the finishes of that tunnel area come the 1st of next year. So essentially, General Assembly member staff who park in that new parking deck will then be able to take an elevator down to the basement, walk across under 9th Street into the new General Assembly building. That building or that parking deck is scheduled to be complete 3rd quarter of 2022. Moving south now, let's start with the tunnel from the GAB to the Capitol. So we're building a 600-foot pedestrian tunnel that will connect the GAB on the south side of the building, the southwest side of the building, southeast side of the building, that will run south to Capitol Square, run along southeast, the equestrian statue, then going further south and connecting into the extension of the Capitol. So we're not touching the 1700s historic Capitol building itself, but we are going to be coming in the extension area. For those of you that are familiar with the extension, where we have our food service, the Meriwether's food service, right above that space is where the connector will take place. That work will be completed in 2 phases. The first phase will be completed in the, I believe, 2nd quarter of 2022. And then we're going to come back for the second phase, 4th quarter of 2023. And the way the phases are broken out, the first phase will take us from the General Assembly building into Capitol Square, stopping short of the Washington equestrian statue. Let us get past inauguration in January, and then we'll pick back up that work in February, that being the phase 2 work from the equestrian statue down to the Capitol extension. Any questions on that, David, before I continue?
No, that and I tell you, that will be quite a benefit. And would I be correct in thinking that both visitors and employees and legislators would be able to use that tunnel? Is that right?
Yes, David. In my discussions right now with the clerk's office, is the plan is for it to be available to both pedestrians and the General Assembly members and staff. Yes. So we talked last time, I believe, about the compass rose and skylight that is on the plaza in front of the portico steps of the Capitol. And at the time, that structure was a glass structure that opened up to the inside of the extension. We, over time and for many years, had experienced water leaks through that skylight. And so DGS took on a project, again, working closely with both the clerk of the House and the clerk of the Senate in a design to do a concrete infill of that area to mitigate the water intrusion, but then also come back with a very similar Compass Rose and state seal. That work is complete, and it's a marvelous piece of architecture. If you hadn't had a chance to go out and see it, I encourage people to do that. And from our experience to date, we are quite confident that we have eliminated the water infiltration at that particular site.
Now that project took, I don't know, it didn't take that long, but many of us saw the tent that was covering it and protecting it, and it was great to see that removed, and it is something that people should get a chance to take a look at. It's great.
Yeah, sure, David. We had the tent up because we actually were working in an open hole, and we wanted to keep weather out of it. And quite frankly, too, it did help the stonemasons that were working in the hot summer heat to relay that stone for sure. Something I missed too, as we're going south, the bird statue. We have relocated that statue. That took place in July. That was under the direction of the General Assembly, who authorized and gave direction to DGS to remove that statue off of Capitol Square. Right now, the plans for that space, because the tunnel comes right through there, the plan is not to address that with any landscaping at this time. Once we do finish up the tunnel connection, then the current thought is that that becomes green space and will be landscaped accordingly to complement the tunnel area for the GAB capital extension. So 9th Street Sidewalk.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that, because as one who walks past that coming and going to the office, it's just great to see that coming along, and people who haven't seen it and will see it completed will say, "Oh, the eyesore is gone," and it's going to look nice.
David, I've got to thank you for our discussions over the many years about the 9th Street sidewalk and just the disrepair that it had been in, and the fact that it really wasn't a welcoming area for our visitors to Capitol Square. And you and I have had a number of conversations on that, and I appreciate that. So that area was essentially concrete sidewalk that was in disrepair. And there were also some bioretention ponds, some water collection areas that, quite frankly, weren't working properly. And we went in, we had the property transferred from the city to the Commonwealth. And we went in with a design, working with the city, working with the clerk's offices, that pretty much extends the brick design that we see around the south side of Capitol Square, the east side of Capitol Square. The brick herringbone pattern is what we have since laid along 9th Street. We have, maybe about another 30 days max to wrap up that project before it'll be open for public use. We're also going back in there with some lighting that carries the same light posts that you see on the south and the east side of Capitol Square, we'll now see on the west side. So very excited about the sidewalk on 9th Street. And I do think that it's going to be a much more inviting space coming into Capitol Square. So coming into Capitol Square, North Drive, we have worked very closely with our Capitol Police partners, again, as well as with the clerks and the governor's office on a new entry into Capitol Square. There was once in the mid-1800s, as part of the Sabaton designed fence, a gated area at that North Drive entrance. Working with the Capitol Square Preservation Council, who did some research on this for us, we are coming back into that space with a replicated gate that brings us back to that 1860s design for the North Drive area. You're also going to see in that area coming onto Capitol Square, as you do on the left-hand side, a Capitol Police facility where the Capitol Police will greet visitors that are in vehicles as well as on foot coming to Capitol Square, helping them, give them direction within Capitol Square. If they're not to have driven onto the square, Capitol Police will help guide them back onto 9th Street and provide them directions to where they are trying to get to. You will also see some herringbone brick patterns in the immediate area where the Capitol Police facility is, that carries the brick sidewalk into Capitol Square. And we will have secure bollards that will be behind the gates in Capitol Square that will be controlled by the Capitol Police, for the Capitol Police to allow those authorized vehicles to actually come onto the square. The timing to complete that project will be late November, early December. Again, excited to have that complete and bringing the entire west side of Capitol Square together prior to the inauguration in January. Because as you know, that becomes the front door for our visitors to the inauguration. It's the front door for the parade route. And it's going to be exciting to see this newly finished area and how it relates to the inauguration in 2022. I think that now covers all of the active construction projects that we have going on. But I do want to mention a couple other projects that DGS has been funded in design to start. One is a new Supreme Court building that we are designing where the current East Pocahontas building sits today. The Pocahontas building, as you know, is comprised of essentially two facilities, two buildings, one a western tower and then an eastern tower. Our plan right now is in working with the design team, working with the Supreme Court, working with the Court of Appeals, getting into design, is that we will look to raise the west building, maintain the, raise the east building, let me be clear, raise the east building and renovate the west building, because the west building has more of a historic significance than does the east building. So we're in design at this time for that facility, for that area, and something that will probably be in design for the next year and a half. Going further south down Main Street at 7th and Main, you may remember that the Virginia Employment Commission had a building at the corner of 7th and Main. That building has been transferred to the Department of General Services, and we do have authorization from the General Assembly in funding to design a new office building on that site with parking. Our current plan is that that building would house the tenants that we have in the Monroe Tower. So we would be building a building that would accommodate all of our current tenants and parking that is in the Monroe Tower. and also look to see if there are any opportunities for additional tenants to be relocated to that facility. We have just moved into our selection of a design team process. We should have that wrapped up probably in the next 30 days, and I expect we'll be fully engaged in programming for that facility come the first of next year.
Joe, a couple of times you've mentioned parking, and I know all of that's been for state employees. I wanted to just jump in and ask you, I think a year ago you provided some parking for visitors who are coming on Capitol Square. Any plans to continue that? Or I know people look for parking when they come to the Capitol.
Right. Thank you for that question. At our parking deck at 9th and Franklin, we do have approximately 100 spaces available to the general public that they can use on an hourly fee basis. And we do very much plan to keep that parking resource available to the general public. As a matter of fact, David, just a real quick comment on that area where you exit the 9th and Franklin parking deck onto 9th Street. We are working very closely with the city to take a look at the Bank and 9th and Bank and Franklin intersections. Those intersections, in my opinion, are those that are not very well marked for pedestrians, and that pedestrians must pay very close attention to when they're navigating across 9th Street between that parking deck and the Bank Street area. Because not only we have state employees walking back and forth, and now we're introducing our visitors, DGS felt the need to work with the city and look at how we can enhance our crossings from a safety perspective. We had an initial meeting with the city last week to start talking about design. DGS is actually committed to and funding the design for this space. And we hope to have a design in place probably the middle of next year. So to your point, David, yes, parking for the public will remain, but also too, we want to make that visitor parking a much safer experience coming over to the Capitol from that parking facility.
Great. I interrupted your train of thought. You were dealing with the building down on 7th Street and the design. What were you moving to next before my interruption?
Sure. So I do want to talk a little bit about, in addition to all of the moving parts and all the construction and all the design, what we see coming here in and around Capitol Square that DGS is responsible for, and again, working closely with the governor's office and the legislative branch. I do want to comment about just an operational event that we're all familiar with, and that is transition and inauguration. With all the moving parts with these construction projects, we also have moving parts with getting ready for inauguration and transition that we started planning back in the spring of this year, and are now moving into, getting our facilities actually ready for this big event. The Patrick Henry building, we have cleaned the exterior of the building, and we have replaced broken windows in that building, as well as we are painting the window sills on the outside. That is the executive branch cabinet and executive office building. So we need to address the maintenance needs of that before transition and inauguration. Also, what we've done is the historic granite wall on Bank Street and on Governor Street. A wall area that we, DGS, have not focused much attention on from a maintenance standpoint. We recently have gone through there and cleaned the granite stone and repointed all of that granite stone that runs the length of Bank and Governor Street. So I think, again, those of you that haven't been down in Capitol Square lately, that will be a noticeable improvement as you come on to Capitol Square. We are getting ready to complete our survey of the south side of the Capitol in the hill where we install the bleachers. Bleachers, you'll start seeing us doing work, digging holes for the actual structures that hold up the bleachers towards the end of this month, first part of November. And then you'll start seeing the actual bleachers going up between now and the end of December, getting ready for that inauguration in January. We're also continuing to clean some of our other buildings inside the fence, the Oliver Hill building, the Washington building, those buildings that just needed some facelift, some maintenance on DGS's part. We're actively involved in sprucing up those areas again, getting ready for inauguration. So you can see, David, in addition to the construction projects, the operation stuff never stops. And we continue to work those and having to do that coordination. And again, couldn't do it without the great team we have at DGS, those responsible for these capital projects, as well as those responsible for the inauguration and transition. We really have wonderful state employees, and I can't thank them enough.
Well, Joe, thank you so much. And before we let you go, there will be some of the public, and particularly those who work around the Capitol during the session, who'll be wondering, I wonder what he's going to do with transition offices now that Old City Hall's I assume is not available. And gosh, Joe, I can remember back, and you can too, you were deputy director, that 8 years ago, that there were 2 transition offices provided for those who were seeking to serve as attorney general because there was a recount. So we can hope that you only have to provide 3 transition offices this time. Have you decided so far where they will be?
Well, thank you, David, for letting me comment a little bit more about this. And we've got a great lead on our transition inauguration, Dina Potter, who is very much on top of transition for the incoming governor-elect, lieutenant governor-elect, and attorney general-elect, and working very closely, of course, with our security and law enforcement partners for these facilities. So we've identified space in our existing buildings around Capitol Square, that being the Washington building, Jefferson building, and Oliver Hill, that we will use for transition space. To your point, we have and are planning for the many different outcome scenarios that could happen, and ensuring that if we do have runoffs in any one of these offices or in multiple offices, we need to be ready. We need to be prepared. And so we have conducted our planning in such a way that if we do have runoffs in these offices, we will have the transition office space for both candidates that would be involved in any runoff.
I had not really done all the math, but as you were talking, I could see where temporarily you'd almost be looking at 5 or 6 offices, just in hopes that only 3 would be needed. That That the decision that the voters are making right now and will complete their making on November 2nd would be decisive. But it doesn't always happen that way. Well, Joe, we thank you so much, Captain and Executive Director Damico. Before I would wrap it up, was there something else that you wanted to say? I know you were thanking the team when I interrupted you to talk about transition offices. Anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, and let me just expand on that. When I say team, not only the DGS team, but as you know, Capitol Square really doesn't function without the leadership and support of the clerk's offices, the Capitol Police, the governor's office, the Secretary of Administration, the governor's chief of staff, and DGS. And we all work in a very collaborative way. And I think that we do it in a way that makes this historic Capitol one that many people from around the country want to visit, and when they visit are very impressed with what they see. And the work that we're doing today, I believe, is just going to enhance that visitor experience. And as I say that word, let me also compliment the Capitol Square Preservation Council and their work in developing wayfinding signage for Capitol Square that will also provide additional enhancements to the square and make that visit to Capitol Square much more enjoyable. But David, I can't thank you enough too for the opportunity to allow me to come on here and talk about the work that we're doing at Capitol Square and keep people informed of what we're doing. It's a continuous improvement process, one that we're going to be at for some of these projects for many years to come. But for some that have been in progress for a while, we're looking forward to the end next year and bringing in again, Ferguson Building, Morrison Row, Old City Hall, North Drive, 9th Street sidewalk, General Assembly Building, parking deck. I mean, it's just going to be great to see the transformation come next year.
Joe Damico, Director of the Department of General Services, thank you again, and we thank our viewers, and we thank you for the opportunity to showcase what's happening on Capitol Square. Thank you.